During a recent press interview, I was asked by a reporter for my view on what the next hot thing will be. A question that is becoming more common with each press interview given the current market uncertainties. I shared a few trends of personal interest that I've been tracking. But rather than telling you what I shared, let me share with you how I identify trends and weak signals. That is the topic of this week's podcast.
This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
Before we get started, let's get some definitions straight. So what is a trend? A trend is a change that will eventually have a significant macro impact on society and business. It needs to be significant. It needs to last for an extended period of time. Counter to a trend is what we would call a fad. A fad is a change that will be a fleeting impact on society and business. A trend, for instance, would be the explosive growth of technology, particularly in computers. A fad would be pet rocks. What we're focusing on here really is about trends. So how do you find a trend? For me, it's about observation. That includes watching, listening, reading. And for me, I talk to a lot of people. I have a close circle of people who I think are really creative thinkers, who are great observers, that are scattered throughout the world. And for me, talking to these people, visiting with these people, going with them because they're close to the local society, local consumers and customers and businesses and government officials, it's about being able to have that direct interaction. I tend to look for the non-obvious. If it appears in a popular press or it appears in an analyst report or Wall Street's talking about it, it's too late for me. That is of no value. I'm looking for the non-obvious. Now, the process I go through is 1. Brainstorm a list of trends or changes. I typically collect these over time. It's by doing these observations, by listening, by talking to people. Some trends and changes that may seem obvious to you now, but weren't many, months ago or even years ago, are things like fundamental shifts that are occurring in technology, society view on education, new government regulations for regulating new solar technologies, the GDP changes of the economy, the aging of the population. The objective here is to identify as many of these trends as possible. And some of these trends may be specifically to a region or to a country or to a particular type of business or a particular type of industry. But fundamentally, you want to look for trends across economic, demographic, technology, society, government, ecology, green. Looking across those kinds of areas and look for the trends that are appropriate for your business, for your segment, for your geography. Then what I do is rather than just thinking, okay, that's the trend list I should be dealing with, you're trying to uncover where those trends have impact on each other, where you're going to get super reinforcement or reinforcement from multiple trends influencing each other. The way I do this is I take each of those trends and I compare them against every other trend. Every other trend that's in the list, I take the top one and I compare that against second, third, fourth, and fifth. If those two trends are happening, what happens at the intersection? What becomes interesting at the intersection of those two trends? Let me give you an example. Let's take two trends that I listed. One is the aging of the population, what some people refer to as the gray wave. People over the age of 50. What's happening with that? It's quickly becoming the largest segment of the consumer population out there with huge influence and ability to have disposable income. Large home ownership, looking to get the benefit of all that hard work back in things that they've always wanted and now can afford. Second trend to look at, technology, the shift that's fundamentally happening. Moore's Law, improving processor speeds, reduced cost of technologies. If you look at the combination of aging and technology coming together, what are some of the things you see? For instance, technology for the home to monitor or provide health care, such as diabetic meters that actually plug into your broadband access in your house and send that information back to your doctor. home dialysis, no longer needing to go into a dialysis center or eventually into a hospital to get your kidney dialysis. You can actually do that while you sleep at home. So you're seeing some fundamental overlaps where technology and aging, but what does that really mean? Now, once you've identified where those collisions are and what those opportunities are, what you're seeing out there, what you want to do for each trend in the list is look for the underlying drivers and barriers. So what do I mean by a driver? A driver is something that actually supports or will eventually help accelerate this trend to become mainstream. The barriers are things that are going to slow it down, speed bumps, things that are actually going to prevent this trend from becoming a reality. So if we go back and look at the example that I've given here about aging and technology, what are some of the drivers? Drivers, one is escalating cost of healthcare. Where there's an increase in cost, the ability to bring efficiency in becomes very attractive to that market segment. So the escalating cost of healthcare actually could be an attractor to this convergence between bringing technology and this growing population that has disposable income. Second driver, the strong desire of this demographic to live at home, not to have to go to the hospital, not to have to go into a nursing home, the ability to live independently. So that's just an example of two drivers. What would be an example of a barrier? One example of the barrier is government regulation. The hurdle that technology companies or even healthcare providers have to go through to get government approval before a new device or a new piece of technology can be used in the healthcare field is huge, and it's very, very expensive. So again, drivers for this example, escalating cost of healthcare, the desire to live at home. A barrier example would be government regulation. Now, I'm only giving you a subset of the drivers and barriers in this example. The key here is that when you look at each trend, you compare them against all the other trends that are in your list, look for the drivers and barriers, and be exhaustive. Look at all possible drivers. Look at all possible barriers. Really spend some time understanding what is going to drive and then what's going to prevent a given convergence of these two trends together in order to make sure you understand the overall market opportunity. So now you've got this list. You've got this list of all the possible convergence between the trends that are on your master list, and you've identified the drivers and barriers. So how do you determine the big winners? You've got this massive list. Which ones should you go after? The way I do this is I create a 2x2 grid. The horizontal axis is the barriers. The left-hand side of the axis means it's really, really hard. This is going to be a really tough set of barriers. To the right-hand side of that horizontal axis is barriers are almost non-existent, or the ones that you've listed aren't going to be hard to overcome. The vertical axis is drivers. The lower part of the axis on the vertical would be drivers are non-existent, versus the top vertical would be there's significant drivers that are really going to accelerate this trend. So now, take each one of those convergence. So in this case, this whole concept of converging healthcare and aging, and plot it on this grid, on this 2x2 grid. Now, typically you can just put a dot on the grid. I'm into using as much visual information when I'm trying to convey opportunities. So rather than just putting a dot on the grid, vary the size of that dot to show impact. Now, impact can be denoted by size of the market, revenue, gross margin, the compounded annual growth rate of that segment, whatever is meaningful to you. So again, horizontal is barriers, vertical is drivers. The size of the placement of the information on the convergence of two trends on that grid is to denote impact. How big is this impact going to be in the marketplace? The other piece that you need to convey is estimate when the trend emerges. Now, you can do this with color. Certain colors meaning it's within a couple of years, a different color meaning that it's going to be 3 to 5 years out, a third color means it's going to be 5 years or longer out. Now, the key here is items in the upper right are the ones that deserve more investigation. You're not trying to be overly scientific. You're not trying to be overly accurate. You're trying to get a first cut to know which ones you're going to go after. Because if you've done your early work, if you've been exhaustive in creating the list, If you've been exhaustive in understanding the convergence of any two trends, if you've been exhaustive on the barriers and drivers, you've got a huge amount of information. You can't dig into the detail on each and every one. You need to have a filtering process. And so the filtering process here is plot them on the 2x2 grid, and you're looking for those items that are of significant impact that are in the upper right corner. And then those are the ones that you should actually then go off and start investigating, doing more observations, getting out there, understanding if that need really does exist, understand if that market opportunity really exists, and prioritize the ones that you're going to focus in on. Now, once you've got this grid, maintain the grid on an ongoing basis. Whether it's monthly or quarterly, revalidate the barriers and the drivers, revalidate the impacts and when you think they're going to happen. Also, continually look for new trends. Now, how do you stay fresh and find these new trends? Look for weak signals. Now, what's a weak signal? A weak signal is an early hint of a coming trend. Some will call it trend spotting. Some people call it black magic. Finding weak signals comes from having some keen observation skills. Now, when you see or hear something that jars you, that's when you should listen harder. If it makes you uncomfortable, dig in. When I get that feeling in my gut, when I hear about something and you go, ooh, that's weird, I would never do that. Bingo. Those are the ones that you should be digging in on. Now, there are some fundamental rules to identifying or working with weak signals. The more irreverent and upsetting the new idea is to the status quo, meaning that everybody's talking against it, the more likely it will turn into a full trend. The more often you hear, hey, it's just a fad, the more likely it's not a fad. Now, identifying and monitoring weak signals should be an ongoing process in an organization, particularly organizations that want to have sustained growth. If you stick your head in the sand and assume that your own internal fumes and drinking your own Kool-Aid is going to get you that next growth opportunity, you're sadly mistaken. You need to have a process that allows you to identify and monitor these weak signals. Now, weak signals tend to grow by joining forces with other weak signals. By joining forces with other ideas that are outside the mainstream, that's how they get their traction. It's how they get the visibility. Now, the way I do it when I'm looking for fundamentally new trends, after I've got my grid and I'm out there constantly looking for new things, I keep a separate list of the weak signals and I review them regularly. In many cases, I'll review it weekly. I'll just kind of go down to the list and try to recall, have I heard something this week? Have I talked to somebody this week? Have I seen something in the press? Have I talked to a customer that reinforces a weak signal? And the questions I'm asking myself, is this weak signal getting traction? Are the drivers coming together that's going to make this a really big opportunity? And what's changing with the barriers? What's the barriers? Is a certain barrier falling down, meaning the barriers tend to going away? The key with watching for weak signals is knowing when to take action. Moving too fast, and you overinvest ahead of the market. And your management team will only do that for a certain period of time before they kill the project. If you move too slow, you miss taking advantage of the full opportunity. This is the toughest part when you're watching trends and you're trying to get the timing right. Now, there's no magic formula that you can apply here. This is where it comes into is understanding when the trend will get traction. Given the barriers, given the drivers, when does those things come into play based on when do you estimate that trend's going to get traction? From that date back up to how far you need in order to make sure you've got a product available then, and then use some kind of other validation points, some additional hints that this trend is getting traction is going to be the big thing. But the key here is understanding how to hold back your enthusiasm and not move too fast, but at the same time, don't be so conservative that you move so slow that somebody else is able to step in and take advantage of that whole opportunity. Now, the net result is that watching for trends and weak signals is a 24/7 activity. This is not something you turn off. It's everything you see, everything you read, everybody you talk to, everything that you watch on TV. This is not something you can do 9 to 5. You are out there. You need to have your ears open, your eyes open, your antennas up, and you're looking for those ideas, those new hints, those weak signals that something is changing. Individuals who can see the future, they can see what's going to happen 1 year, 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road, are highly valued. And by getting a personal process in place, you can become that seer for your organization. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only process that works, but this is the process that works for me. And I've used this process over many, many years, and it has become very reliable for me to be able to see what's happening, understand the timing, and help drive the decision-making on when to make certain investments, when to focus on certain development of innovations in order to get that timing right. And hopefully you can take this process, modify it, apply it to what you do within your organization, and it'll help you be more successful. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow directly for the blog at Phil McKinney on Twitter. Also, we have a Twitter feed now for the weekly Killer Question. So it is Twitter feed Killer Question. Join the community. Go over to killerinnovations.com/community, and you'll find all the links to sign up for the Twitter feeds, but also to join into the community over at Facebook and LinkedIn. Please send your feedback to the topics of the podcast. Also, send in the topics that you would like to see covered. Email those to podcast@killerinnovations.com. Also, you can post your comments on the show notes at killerinnovations.com. Don't forget to pay it forward. The only thing that I ask is that you pay it forward to others as a way for me to pay it back to my early mentors. When I asked them how I was going to pay them back for all the time and the investment that they made in me in my early part of my career, the instruction from them was, pay it forward to others later in my career. This podcast is my way to pay it forward, and all I ask for you is to pay it forward. Link to the site, tell others, share the information, use the information, and let me know how the podcast is helping you, both personally and within your organization. Thanks again for taking the time out of your busy week to listen to the podcast. I truly do appreciate it, and I know time is one of the most valuable assets we have today, and I do appreciate you taking this time. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.